Today we are joined by Barry Mainz. Barry, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And so before we jump into the topics that we want to talk about, it'd be great if you could tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So James, we were talking earlier. I was born in San Francisco, so born and raised. Spent a bunch of my earlier life here. I still live in the Bay Area here in California, although I spent lots and lots of time traveling around the world, having international teams. So I like to think of myself as a changed man, having spent so much time in multiple places, which I think has been great. I spent time earlier in my life as an athlete, played soccer, played college soccer. I think that has been a big impact in terms of how I think about building high performing teams and what matters with the people you have in the teams and the talent. And I remember having teams that we had some of the best players, but as a team, we didn't play very well and we lost games. So, hey, what do you do with talent? And, how do you make sure that 1 + 1 equals something greater than 2? And most of my life's been in tech, although I did start in high-tech advertising. But most of my career has been in tech and sales management, executive management, C-level management. So I've got to see a lot of different perspectives and how things work. And, pursuant to the topics at hand here, I think everything's the team. It's about people. And primarily, if you're thinking about people building software or SaaS applications, you don't have storefronts, you don't have machines that are building, automating things. You're really relying so much on the talent. So for me, I think this topic about talking, about, hey, how would we, or what are some of the tips and tricks about how we manage our talent and get more is key. So I'm excited to talk about that today with you.
Yeah. Let's start to jump into it. So I think the first topic that I know people are really thinking through right now is, what is going to be the future of work, and what are some of the biggest changes that we're seeing across the workforce in terms of what employees are looking for, how to attract and retain talent, how to operate in a remote first world, and how companies can kind of strike the balance between remote and an on-site in office. So I think just to get started, I would love to hear from your perspective, what are the primary shifts that you've seen in the workplace over the past couple of years, and what challenges do you see, what opportunities do you see at a high level?
Yeah, so great question. I think all of us as execs or even non-execs think about this a lot. Certainly COVID or the pandemic has certainly taught us you don't have to be in work every single day for every single minute. So being able to do remote sessions, whether you use some sort of Zoom or, kind of Teams or what have you, is an effective way of getting stuff done. I think the other thing that we've learned is there is a gap when all you do is meet remotely or digitally, in that, hey, how do you do game boarding or strategy offsites? Because a lot of that works much better face-to-face. And, I think oftentimes constructive confrontation is better done face-to-face than on Zoom, especially if you don't have a relationship. For some reason, and there's a lot of psychological answers to this, is that, hey, humans do a lot better, especially to build relationships face-to-face. And once you have those relationships, it's easier. We talked a little bit earlier about before the podcast started, it was about customers. And so I think gone are the days that you fly to New York for one customer visit, if from the West Coast. But I do feel like to gain new customers or impactful relationships, face-to-face works. And there's still cultural differences that we have to be mindful of, say parts of Japan or parts of Europe where, if it's a critical relationship, face-to-face matters. And so we see that, you have to allow for that as we're starting to see things open up, spending time. Also, you don't have to be all in the same location. Like people are in California, there's been many people have moved to places maybe it's a little bit more affordable, either within state or outside of state, to start their family, buy a house and do that. And so, hey, they can actually work remotely and maybe come in once a week, and that works out okay. So I think that's a completely different norm than we used to, because I even remember our teams, we'd say, hey, well, you got to be in every day. I don't care where you live, but as long as you come in when you're supposed to. And I think that's, we have a lot more flexibility with that. And then I'd say last but not least, I'm not sure we've completely sorted out what a hybrid workplace looks like yet. And I still think we're learning. I do feel like again, over the next, several quarters, we'll have a good beat on it, but it certainly won't be like we had before. So I'm excited to kind of see how we'll leverage kind of the new norm for that.
I was speaking with somebody, one of my clients that's in people leadership, actually based out of Napa. And one of the things that we were discussing was, as they're starting to return to this hybrid schedule, one thing that's a real challenge is that throughout the pandemic, they ended up hiring people that are not commutable to the office at all. So now it's like this, almost like she's trying to figure out, how do we not create a weird dynamic where some people are returning in office part-time, but others aren't. And how do you create like a inclusive environment where everybody's involved when not maybe everybody's going to be able to return to that hybrid schedule? I'm wondering, because obviously your team is distributed globally and you have people in several locations. How do you go about tackling that potential challenge, right? If you're running an office, I mean, is that something that your team is working with?
That's a great question. And a lot of that has to do with scale. Like, we have an international team. We've always had that even prior to pandemic. So we've had to have some sort of a model like this, whether one of the execs or somebody traveled to the other location, hey, they're popping up on Zoom. So you're having your staff, weekly staff, hey, two people are not even in the same country or the same location. So I think for, smaller companies or companies that are located in one area and then somebody moves out, maybe a little bit of I would be happy to talk to anybody about, hey, how it transitioned, because I've worked at small companies where everyone's in one location and now you're just forced to. So I would say it's okay if they're not in the office all the time, and making sure you accommodate at least some flexibility where maybe they fly in, for if they have to fly or drive every other week for a day or two, or you show up at a staff sometime to kind of get that, relationships built with the folks within the office or the team.
Sure. And so you're basically, what your team has decided is that you're going to keep everything fully remote at least for the foreseeable future. Or I know you said you're still working through the hybrid.
Yeah,
what that looks like.
We have flexibility, and so it depends on which country. So we have an office in Estonia. We have north of 200 people there. They've been back in the office for the longest amount of time, partly because most people are from somewhere else and they live in a little bit smaller homes or apartments. And so having 2 or 3 people in a small, apartment is hard to have talking all at the same time. So they really wanted to go back to work. So that's kind of, they sort of sorted that out, and there's some hybrid there, but they've sorted a lot of that out. Here in, the Bay Area, we have an office in Santa Clara, and there's a lot of people who said, hey, well, let's go back for meetings. We'll go back for maybe strategic customer meetings. We'll go back in the office because we have a nice conference room and stuff. But for the most part, we'll stay remote unless we have to. And so that's starting to work out. Say for the last couple of months, we've been going back in the office and having maybe a staff meeting or a strategy meeting, or like I said before, a customer meeting. The one thing that has changed though is customer meetings are starting, important ones, as I mentioned earlier, coming back to the office. So some customers want to come and say, hey, I'm going to be coming to the Bay Area. Can I stop by and meet with you folks? So we're seeing that coming back on, where, boy, for a couple of years, it was not very common. So people are flying back into the US and they're having to invite or to meet maybe some other key suppliers or partners, and they want to meet. And so they come to the office, or, and that's been really great. So I do think there'll be a hybrid. We're already doing it right now. We have an agile workspace. So theoretically, if we went back to full capacity, people would not be 6 feet apart. So, any social distancing for everybody being back, it's just not going to happen. So we would have to wait till, the city says, hey, you don't need to be, there's no restrictions. And I think we're starting to see that. So I think people will feel more comfortable coming back to the office as that happens too.
Sure. And I'm curious too, to just get your thoughts on what you're seeing with retention trends over the past couple of years. I mean, everybody's talking about this great resignation, and before we hit record, we were kind of thinking through like, well, is that really applicable in tech? I feel like to some extent, the turnover has always been high in tech, right? So it's not like, I think a lot of us in tech are like, well, this is kind of par for the course, right? Like
yeah,
every year or 2 years, it's like, wow, so I'm kind of curious to get your thoughts on what trends you're seeing there, and then also, could you talk to us about what your team is doing to if retention is a priority, what is your team doing to maybe, I suppose, keep employees engaged and keep employees excited about the work ahead of them?
Yeah. So first, we try and compete with flexibility. So where we're starting to see some larger companies requiring people to come back to the office, we're not. We're using that as a lever to be creative, and so we can go to outside of California or outside of the areas where we would potentially have an office. You have an office in Tampa, Florida, too, out of the area to be able to recruit, and that's been really successful. We tend to have much better retention rates, James, to your question, because there might be a lifestyle, and they're not. The cost of living isn't such that they have to keep thinking about their career in terms of how they progress financially so that they can afford things as they move along in their, kind of life and get married and kids and whatever. And so think about them. And it's less competitive. Like, it's pretty competitive in certain areas. And I can just say the Silicon Valley from a competitive on comp and, talent. So that actually helps us. Part of our strategy is, hey, can we go to areas where we can get terrific talent? And maybe it's not so competitive. So the retention is better. Right? We're not having that. So I think those are some of the strategies that we're employing. And then I think the other thing that we think about is what's gonna, what do our employees want too? We've been really doing a lot of kind of pulse surveys to kind of say, hey, what are you guys thinking about? What do you want in terms of flexibility? And we're trying to mirror our strategy and our talent strategy and our kind of back to work strategy with what our employees want. So that's been helpful. And we've done things like, hey, we have done come back to work and do strategy meetings. We've also done wellness days, which has been one where people feel like, there's no balance between work and life now because you're in your home. But let's give someone a wellness day every month. We give them a 1 day off, 1 Friday off, so that they can actually go and do something for themselves. And we find that that's been really well accepted with people.
We actually do something very similar. We call them recharge days.
Recharge days, okay.
So we do one about once a month.
Yeah,
it's actually done quite a good job. What I love about wellness days or recharge days is that it's like in my opinion, like a baked in coolant to ensure people don't burn out. Because even if you have a 1 month PTO policy or an unlimited policy that we're in a culture where people actually feel comfortable taking a fair amount of time off, what ends up happening though is that you take the time off, maybe 2-3 weeks, and then you don't take anything off for 6 months. And 6 months with all the craziness in the world today is more than enough time to burn out.
Yeah.
Particularly in tech. So what we've done is we actually implemented all federal holidays off, and then 1 recharge day off essentially a month. And so what we do is, like, if 4th of July, for instance, is on a Monday, then we'll close down the previous Friday. So everybody gets essentially like 1 4-day weekend.
Oh, that's good.
And it's actually been, I was, to be honest, I was a little bit, I wasn't sure how it was going to work, because wow, that's a fair amount of time off, because that's not even PTO. We're taking about, it's like 2 days off a month, not even, we also have like a 4-week PTO policy. But I was actually very pleasantly surprised. Like, productivity has never been stronger. It really does help people just get recharged, take some time off, and come back with even more energy, ready to tackle the week. So
James, are your days Fridays typically?
Yeah, Fridays or Mondays. So so it's if a holiday is on a Friday, then the Monday will be off generally.
Makes sense.
So we just kind of tack it on to the weekends.
That makes sense.
But yeah, it's really proven itself to us. And quite honestly, I even try to take advantage of it too. Like, I'll turn off my computer and step away as well. And it's been a pretty good experience as well. So for me too. So I think everybody's been pleasantly surprised by how well it works.
Excellent. Well, good. Yeah, no, us as well. Employees tend to like it a lot.
Yeah, for sure. So what are some of the other trends that you're seeing in terms of employee feedback? Is there anything, so it's more flexibility, time off, people past couple of years they're struggling with burnout. I think hopefully we're coming out the other end of that. But is there any other type of feedback or preferences, or they're looking for certain types of benefits, or they're looking for certain types of career tracks? Like, what other shifts are you seeing right now?
Yeah, so let's just start with the benefits. Most of the employees that I interview, or we're hearing through our employees that are interviewing, is they always ask about flexibility. Hey, can I work from remote? Hey, do I have a possibility if I move, if I'm here, whatever, to be some sort of a hybrid model, and is that okay? So that is one that people check off. And hey, by the way, I was even asked, is that going to change? Well, I mean, can't really answer that, but for the foreseeable future, no. So that's one that, probably never really got asked as much as say, hey, do I have a hybrid work? I mean, maybe you used to get asked before, say, hey, is it okay that I might work a few hours at home while I pick up my kids or I do something? I mean, and you say, okay, well, you can work the meet one morning from home and then commute in at lunchtime or whatever, right? What we used to say. But so there's the one asking for flexibility. I think the other thing people are asking for that we didn't maybe have before is, hey, can I go work in a different country, one of your locations? What's the flexibility there? And we've had that both from, we have an office in Cork, a sales office. Hey, can I come to the US? And, the same holds true for some of the folks in the US. Hey, what sort of flexibility do I have? And, I don't know if that's just pent up demand because people haven't traveled for a while. So they're like, hey, I want to go do something different and explore. But that's something that, hadn't had as much. And I've got that a lot of people come to me, hey, what do you think about this? Can I do that? So that was one. And, that is easier some areas than others, as you probably know. So that's one that hasn't come up as much before, but now a lot. And then I'd say the other thing, just people looking for ways to make an impact, maybe more of a social responsibility on things. I think people have had time to think at home, watch a lot of TV or Netflix or God knows what, and say, hey, maybe I want to have a higher level of social conscience. So they ask a little bit about, hey, how's the company giving back? Or what can I do when I'm at the company to help the local community or whatever? And we do a lot of that in the local geographies too, is, giving back. So we have a lot of that. Maybe, even 2 years ago, I didn't get it as much. So, that social conscious, I think has popped up a bit more.
Yeah, we are starting to see more and more people just, hey, if I'm remote, can I travel? And so we actually have a fair amount of team members. We had one of our team members that decided that she was going to go down to Panama and work from Panama for a month. And we're like,
okay.
Great, that's perfect. I mean, as long as you have strong internet connection, like go for it.
Yeah.
Enjoy.
Yeah, you don't care. And you look at your Zoom background, you would know.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
you could have the same background as you have here and
Right.
just take a picture of it. And James, they'd think you're, in DC or in Panama. You couldn't tell.
No, yeah, exactly. So I definitely think, flexibility is really key right now. What are you seeing in terms of, I mean, right now it's for talent acquisition, is it just in terms of competing right now, given the talent gap and how hard it is to recruit specifically in tech? What are some of the tactics that talent acquisition is implementing right now? I mean, is it really just about communicating flexibility to candidates on the job, communicating impact, social impact? Is there anything else that you're seeing on the talent acquisition side to help attract great people to your organization?
We're a little fortunate in that we're, the category of tech that we sit in is pretty hot. It's security.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, maybe if you never turned your television on or went on your laptop and looked at anything, I mean, it's all over the news. So people know that. So it's a little bit easier to talk about the value prop and why it's important and this kind of thing. So I think we have a benefit there because people get it, say, oh, hey, I want to be there because that's where the action is. And so we have a nice little bogey benefit, which I like. So we play to that strength a lot. And so there's that piece. I think a lot of people have heard about us. Mm-hmm. So, we have two parts of our business. We have a consumer business. So we sell, to consumers a downloadable product. And then we have a corporate business. And so, we've got 50 million users on the consumer side. So there's a lot of people who knew us or knew about us or their family and friends know about us. So the other thing that I like is someone said, hey, I was talking to my aunt and she goes, oh, I know Malwarebytes. I have it on my computer. And it just makes people feel good about what they're doing. And that's always a challenge when you have either a small startup. Now we're not that small. So, 900 employees and $250 million of revenue. So, $250 million. But I do feel like that plays to strength because you want to work someplace where people know it's like, oh, cool. I know you folks. So we play to that strength. And then maybe the last but not least, we talked about before, we really talk a lot about the flexibility and some of the nice benefits we have in and around that, the health and wellness days and, hybrid work from home and that kind of thing. So.
Right. And are you still seeing, I think obviously career track, learning and development is still important. And I think people are still focused on that. They're just also focused on the flexibility piece. But have you seen an evolution over the past couple of years tied to career tracking, professional development, learning and development? Have you seen any shifts occur in that part of the business?
You know, since that's an interesting question. Yes, because if you would think about before the kind of the pandemic, L&D, sort of these remote sessions where you're on a computer. Oh, I gotta sit on a computer for an hour, James. Are you kidding me? Now we say, hey, we have these modules. Oh, okay, I'll look on my computer, right? It's been like a 180 because people are used to it. They're home. Like, God, I've been staring at, I can only work out so much, can only ride the Peloton so much. I can only look at my own TV so much, walk outside, whatever. Boy, it's not bad. I can learn. I can, kind of enhance my career by going online and doing any of these, L&D stuff. So that's changed because it was a little bit harder to get people to do the online. Oh, can I go to a classroom, please? Now that's changed, and that's been a good thing because we can, leverage, online, which is more efficient and cost effective for us. At the same time, too, I think it's a big benefit for the employees. So that's a big change than before.
Yeah, sure. And I think too, it's, I mean, even more specifically than just ongoing L&D, onboarding, right?
Mhm.
And I think a lot of companies, really scale companies, growth stage organizations, in a similar phase of growth to where your team is right now, had to do essentially a complete overhaul.
Yeah.
How was that transition going from probably, primarily in office onboarding to remote? With what had to occur to make that transition successfully?
I think there's technology. There was, hey, how do you make things a little more interesting? Because I think that we all thought, I'd rather go in the corner and poke sharp needles in my eyes than, sit for 9 hours on Zoom, right? And I think if you're talking about onboarding, you're sitting 8-9 hours on Zoom, right? And so, probably making things a little bit more, trying to make it more interesting. I think it was forcing people, they couldn't rely on, some people are funnier or more entertaining in person versus Zoom. It is hard. So how do you leverage some of the things and skill sets that, allow you to do that? Partly is small snippets. You can't sit there and drone on for 45 minutes, maybe 10 or 12-minute chunks and then make a transition. So I think we had to get better at presenting, get better at, hey, how do you think about how the mind works? If you have small chunks of time that you stay focused, just in terms of how people think and how they process information, let's leverage that or learn about that. And in addition to that, how is it effective when you're remotely? And so I think we've had to think a lot more, kind of creatively about how we provide and transfer information and learning.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about onboarding lately and thinking a lot more about companies I think every company, a lot of leaders are obsessing on right now retention, right? And how can we get people to stay with us longer? And obviously that's a very important question. But one thing that I'm starting to give more thought to is like, well, we can't always control these macro shifts in the market where, okay, people are going to be shifting positions more often now. And it's probably a trend that's going to continue. And so I'm starting to think about, maybe organizations, as leaders and companies, we should start thinking about how can we increase the quality and the speed of onboarding so that we can ramp employees faster so that they can begin adding value quicker in an environment where they're probably not going to stay with us as long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's been, I think, alongside trying to tackle retention, I'm putting, a bigger focus right now too. It's just like, how can we just optimize onboarding and really make that a strength where it stands out amongst other companies? And when we can get it to a point where we can honestly say it's like a 9.5 out of 10, then maybe even using that as almost like a talent acquisition tool to put on our careers page and discuss with candidates about, hey, look, this is our onboarding program, this is our training program, and making that kind of an asset that not only helps accelerate value, but helps us attract talent. Because I think in a remote world, like so many candidates right now and employees are experiencing poor onboarding experiences, right? Like I'd say the majority of companies are probably struggling with it right now. So I think companies that can really invest in onboarding and L&D and create great experiences surrounding that really are going to have a competitive advantage in this market, because one, they're going to get more value again quicker from their employees, And then two, that in and of itself is an asset to attract and retain talent.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that one. I think the one area where, we're still struggling a bit with are the microtransactions that happen during the day and that you have to have face to face. I mean, you can use Slack, but like, going up to someone and saying, hey, you know what? Thinking about how do I do that again on here? Or hey, I got to go do a look at this data. How do I log into this tool and what do I do? Oh, okay, I see how to do it.
Right.
Versus saying, hey, can you help me with this? And I just think it's a little bit more difficult. We don't have the hallway conversations. And I think the other piece is the game boarding. Like I'm going to go and say, hey, put something on the whiteboard and just sort of say, let's take a look. Let's take a step back and look at stuff. Some of that doesn't have, there's tools that just hasn't been as effective. Right. And some of the engineers that we talk to, they're like, God, I miss my whiteboard sessions. I need those back. So that's a little bit of an area we're working. There's some tools you can use to go do that. But I still feel like we could, that's having those meetings. And if you go take a look at what some people are doing is on these strategy offsites or just meetings, is that they're game boarding on the whiteboard. Hey, here's what we do here. What do we do this? How do we do this session? Whatever. So I do feel like, again, having the flexibility to have the meeting, get a session or a couple hours at work to get that stuff done has been, people really like that.
Sure. I mean, I think studies are starting to come out linking in person to as being more favorable for anything that requires creativity, right? If you're a solution, if you're trying to create solutions to complex problems, getting a group of people in a room together seems to be ideal. And I think there's more and more apparently data coming out supporting that right now too.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to see a lot more of that over the next few years.
Yeah, I agree with you. I believe it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, this has been a ton of fun, and we are coming up on time here. Before we jump off today, I just, if people wanted to follow you or view your content or what you're doing, how can they find you online?
LinkedIn's probably the best way. There's a lot, I post things up there all the time. And so LinkedIn's a good one. And if anyone has a question about anything, they can certainly just message me. I'm happy to answer them back. I do that all the time.
All right, good stuff. Good stuff. Well, thanks again for coming on today. This has been a ton of fun. And to everybody listening, thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next time.